Thank you very much, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak here. My presentation is going to be based on a study that I did last year called No Transfer, No Production. There are slides available at your desk, and I have copies of the study outside if you want to take it with you. What we did in this study was to look at the importance of data flow for industrial companies. When we talk data flows, we tend to speak about big American companies called Amazon and Google. But what you show when you look at it is that data flows are the lifeblood of industrial companies, mining companies, agricultural companies, all companies today, even small companies around the corner. Everybody relies on data in one way or another. And data is important for two reasons, or basically one reason is about competition, about competitiveness in a very competitive world, where every unnecessary cost will be a huge burden for you when it comes to be able to compete on a global market. And here is why data regulation is so important, and how data regulation is set out to protect data. Everybody wants to protect data. I have to underline that the companies we speak to are very concerned about data protection. There's no doubt about it. But they don't want it to become too much of a burden and put a hamper on their ability to compete. I will bring up 2 points from looking at this from 2 different angles. The first one is, this is the first picture you have there. It's basically based on a discussion with a drilling company. They do drilling, they build drills and drilling machines and sell all over the world. And they explain that today, if you want to compete, if you want your customers to buy your product and not your competitor's product, you have to offer digital solutions. It used to be that you can offer good product. Then it became very important to be able to have a good logistics. So you can move the product to your customer swiftly and in good order. But today, and increasingly so, digital solutions, smart solutions, will become paramount if they want to compete. So that they can remote control drills in mines in the middle of Australia or Siberia or wherever it is. So they say that if we can't move the data, we cannot compete, and the contracts will go to other companies. So that's the first sense why data is so important. The second is that the entire production chain, the entire product, from R&D and testing of materials to getting out raw materials from the ground, making inputs, moving inputs, constructing your products and then selling them, and whatever happens after you've sold them, all that again is depending on data. And every step of the way, data must flow to be able to make this work and to make it work efficiently. In Davos, a few weeks ago, there was a lot of discussion about the 4th Industrial Revolution. We have the German concept of Industry 4.0. And that is all about data and data movement. If we want to realize that, it's about data movement, 3D printing, data movement. And that discussion is very much about just on the actual manufacturing part, on the manufacturing floor. But the production line, the ability to produce a good is much more, as I said, it's all the way from R&D with R&D centers located all over the world to after-sales services, monitoring what happens to the products after you have put them in place in machines and so forth. All depends on data being moved. And there's a lot of data being moved. I mean, I can't give you the gigabytes or whatever number, but if you look at my slides there, you can have the third slide there is you have an example of all the different kind of data. There's a table with data that has to move as a title. All the types of data that has to be moved for one product to be produced, sold, and used. And this is what I found. Probably there are much more reasons why data has to be moved in different kind of data. And there's a wide range from data. And the problem here is, and this is a quote from a person I interviewed from this drilling company I mentioned, private, personal information gets into the picture all the time. Even down on the production floor. You might not think there's there's machines assembling things down there, but personal information is produced and used on the production floor. It's used in the R&D phase, it's used when you produce raw materials, it's used when you're moving things around, it's used when the equipment is used. So personal information gets into the picture every time. So it's very hard for companies to say that we have data that is personal, that is falls under data laws, and data that is not personal, that we can move more freely. So that's the problem for companies that they are facing in all this. And then what happens is that all this data regulation, and we need data regulation, I'll underline that again, all these data regulations become I shouldn't say obstacle, but a problem that they have to take care of, that they have to handle, and that will impact on their ability to compete. So for them, data protection that's too stern, that's too hard to handle, will lead to inefficiencies, will lead to increases in prices, and will lead to a harder time to compete on the global market. And it also impedes how they set up the business. You know that production today is spread out in global value chains all over the world. You have companies that have hundreds subcontractors for every phase of the production chain. And what happens when companies get worried about data regulations to being too stern, and with, well, that's big fines that are coming up now if they breach this. Companies don't like risk. Okay? So what happens, we already see that companies are letting smaller subcontractors go, and they insource tasks that usually tend to be outsourced. And they move away from, or start moving away from, like subcontractors outside of Europe. And I'm not talking about America, I'm talking about Africa, for example, and so forth. So they start moving away. They become scared of the regulation and the fines that can come with it. So we see a difference in the setup, again affecting the effectiveness of the companies and how they are ability to compete, and also affects then the further down the line on SMEs and companies in developing countries that don't get the contracts they used to get before. So that was what I want to say. So it's very important for companies in the industrial sector and agriculture sector to have data moving. Data protection is essential, but the question is, how do we handle data protection so that we don't see these inefficiencies and we can allow small companies to be part of global value chains, and foreign companies also be part of global value chains and make production efficient. Thank you very much.